agenda for December, whatever day this is, Thursday, December 19th, 2019. Madam City Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmembers Huff, Perkins,
Here.
Doherty,
Here.
DeLucy,
Here.
Robertson,
Here.
Van Camp,
Here.
Mayor Weir.
Here. I do want to, just before we get to our citizen request and our one item tonight, just reiterate to the community why we are having this special meeting tonight. As everybody knows, we experienced quite a heavy snowfall on Sunday that was predicted to go into Monday, and we felt it was in the best interest of the safety of our community to postpone the regular council meeting that was scheduled for Monday night. We had 3 public hearings scheduled for that evening, and we certainly did not want to interfere with the public's ability to come and participate in those public hearings. So in the interest of safety and certainly our process, we decided to postpone that meeting until December the 30th, where we will take on that full agenda. This item, however, it does have some time sensitivity. As we will hear, we have a limited opportunity, as I understand it, to access this particularly advantageous interest rate, and that needs to be done prior to the end of the year. And having the meeting on the 30th would not allow us to have the adequate time to do that. So that is what we are considering this evening, and I appreciate everybody's understanding of the change in schedule and creating this somewhat unusual special meeting. We do have one citizen request from Lucy Young, who wishes to speak on the item before us this evening. Mrs. Young.
Thank you. This transcript is taken from the November 12th study session. A council member asked, how are you going to decide, like, let's say you decide to do the $15 million. How do you decide how much of the $15 million is going towards bridges, which to me is more important than curbs or sidewalks? Sidewalks to me are more important than curbs. How are you going to do that? The Public Works Director said, we're going to look at the amount of work it is going to take for each one of those and develop a program around. By doing bridge assessments that I am talking about, we're going to have a budget for each bridge, and putting those together, we're going to develop an overall budget for that bridge program. We will do the same thing with sidewalks, curbs, and gutters. We will go out and put these programs together and estimate by the number of locations that we know we want to do the work. Mr. Public Works Director continued, we have a general idea of what they are going to cost. It's not an exact amount. So it would be something in the neighborhood of $5 million for bridges, maybe about $1.5 million or $1.75 million for each for curbs, gutters, and sidewalks. The other program is intersections, so probably another $4 million for intersections, and then for safety improvements, we have a couple of safety programs we want to do as well for a couple of $1 million. We kind of have a preliminary idea, but we have not actually gone out and fully developed these scopes. Those amounts are a general idea of what we're talking about, but those will vary a little bit. Mr. Walker then says, generally speaking, trying to clarify questions from the council member, generally speaking, what we probably anticipate doing is after tonight, so this is just kind of a first peek behind the curtain. Get any additional feedback, come back to you guys with the final resolution that, again, high level, here's a kind of amount for those each categories. And as Tim has mentioned, every one of those projects will have to be publicly bid, voted on, and approved by council. But before we get those individual grains of sand, there will be a resolution that puts the parameters of where we will be investing correct. The Public Works Director continued and said, the $15 million, well, that for the bridges and other work, and what we have for the equipment, we're not going to ask for much more than that. As I said, the sales tax cannot support it. How can you be so comfortable with such an open-ended contract? We were told that the sales taxes in general were decreasing and the city needed Prop P to support additional city services. Now we're told that street sales tax is a guarantee to cover this $17.8 million loan. The original sales tax language Mr. Penrod, then the Director of Public Works, had his staff climb in cars and assess every city street, every city bridge, and then brought forth a list of projects to show the citizens. This created the transparency that this ordinance lacks. This project is filled with general ideas that the council and citizens are told to trust us, and we will show you those projects at a later date. The problem is that this council has not been trustworthy in the past. There are several contracts voted in that were not in the best interest of the citizens, and several members of this council are under scrutiny by the FBI for those very contracts. Trust me, it doesn't work when some of you have proven to be untrustworthy. Those grains of sand the city manager mentioned need to be examined thoroughly before this council votes to obligate the citizens of Independence with this open-ended contract.
You have 1 minute.
Send this back to staff for more details before you vote. You were first informed of the $1 billion in deferred maintenance programs in 2007. The MoDOT Bridge report is dated July 2019. We're waiting another month for staff to fully define, make any difference really? Or is this just another opportunity for transparency by the council that will be ignored? I have a copy for all of you to read while you're looking at or listening to their presentation of the transcript of the 12th. It's just the first page of my speech. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That takes us to our emergency. There is no consent agenda, so this takes us to our emergency ordinance. Madam City Clerk.
Bill number 19513, an ordinance authorizing the City of Independence, Missouri to enter into an equipment lease purchase agreement with Regions Capital Advantage, Inc., the proceeds of which will be used to pay the cost of acquiring certain public works vehicles and acquiring, constructing, and installing certain public improvements, to approve the execution of certain documents in connection therewith, and increasing appropriations in the amount of $17,940,000 in the Special Streets Fund and declaring an emergency. Bill number 19513, an ordinance authorizing the City of Independence, Missouri to enter into an equipment lease purchase agreement with Regions Capital Advantage, Inc., the proceeds of which will be used to pay the cost of acquiring certain public works vehicles and acquiring, constructing, and installing certain public improvements, to approve the execution of certain documents in connection therewith, and increasing appropriations in the amount of $17,940,000 in the Special Streets Fund, and declaring an emergency. Second and final reading.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. City Manager, I do have a couple of questions regarding this. My understanding is, as we have discussed, we do need to identify future projects and prioritize those projects, so this ordinance isn't doing anything in regards to selecting particular projects. I think in our estimated $1 billion of deferred maintenance, how much of that is transportation and ballpark? I know there was a large portion of electrical infrastructure, other utility infrastructure, deferred maintenance. So what are we talking about in deferred maintenance for transportation infrastructure, streets, sidewalks, et cetera?
Approximately $27.5 million.
Okay. So this is the #1 priority of our citizens, as we hear every other year when we do the citizen satisfaction survey, is street maintenance, and certainly sidewalks, which we have never had dedicated funding for any sidewalk construction. Our 2020 streets tax does allow for that. So my understanding of this, we are, as we experienced earlier this week with our first significant snowfall of the season, our snow crews are not adequately equipped to perform the kind of snow removal that we expect and that our citizens expect. How soon, if my understanding is correct, that this equipment lease is primarily for snow removal equipment, and other street maintenance equipment, is that correct?
Approximately 2.8 million of the overall 17 million is proposed to be allocated to purchase 11 new trucks, which will be used in part for snow removal.
And then what are they used for in the other part of the year when we detach the snow?
Right, so
How does
these
that work?
are trucks that have the dump truck bodies on them. They haul asphalt to do patching around town, other equipment needs
And
as well.
how soon would we be able to acquire those? I mean, we're in the beginning of the kind of winter season. Would we be able to use those this year, or would that be something that we would anticipate having for next year?
My guess, and speaking with the Public Works Director today, it's more than a guess. This is about a year lead time.
Okay, so we're not going to get better snowplows this year,
No.
but we could have them in time for this.
If we're able to act on this now, we would be able to have these for next winter.
Okay, so that's the equipment portion of it. In my reading of this, my understanding is that we are getting an exceptional rate for this money that we would be borrowing from ourselves and paying back to ourselves, that would allow us to address the need much quicker, rather than paying cash for these projects, which we collect through the streets tax and then reinvest into these projects on a schedule that this council approves every single year, about where those priorities are. And outside the event that, we have an emergency, as we did on 42nd Street, and had to change some projects around to address an emergency situation. So this doesn't, my reading of this is that we have a limited opportunity to get an exceptional rate on this borrowed money and be able to address more of these projects in a timelier fashion rather than over a 15-year time span where this money otherwise would be spent. Is that accurate?
That's correct. As if any of us who have borrowed money to purchase a home or a new vehicle, interest rates are only good for a certain period of time. Markets remain volatile, so depending on where the markets are at that day, the interest rates fluctuate. We're in a very good place right now, but that's always subject to change. So the reason we requested that the council take this item up prior to December 30th is we would have lost this interest rate and would have had to go out and seek a new one, and we felt very good. In fact, we were very proud of the interest rate we were able to command and wanted your consideration of that tonight.
So whether this is approved tonight or not, as this money is being spent on these public improvement projects, though each one of those goes out for a bid. Those are all evaluated by our staff. Recommendations are brought back from the council. I presume they're a variety of different things: construction, engineering, planning. All of those types of things are included in the money dedicated for this purpose. So that certainly doesn't change whether we borrow money and front load some of these projects or just do them over time. They're all subject to bid and review by the staff and then approval by the city council and the streets tax oversight committee, correct?
That's correct, and each of
Okay.
these are going to have to be designed, construction documents prepared, put out to bid, and brought to the city council for final approval. Each of these are projects that over the next 15 years we would try to address anyway. This is allowing us to accelerate those, to advance time and complete them over the next 3 to 5 years instead of the next 15, as we fall further and further behind on our deferred maintenance.
Okay. In my opinion, and I will be supporting this tonight, this is something that the citizens have indicated to us as a top priority, is to address the public realm. They approved the street sales tax in perpetuity by a margin of over 80%. We were clear in our communication to the citizens that perpetual tax would allow us to do more long-term financing of that money. So I will be supporting this tonight, and I feel like we have a great opportunity here to borrow money at a fantastic rate and leverage that funding to address the immediate needs of our community. So I would open it up to any other comments or questions.
Madam Mayor,
Yes. Oh, here.
my question, am I not on? Oh. My question is, we're entering into an equipment lease purchase agreement for $17.94 million, but I do not believe we're leasing anything. I believe what we're doing is borrowing $17.94 million from a bank at a very good interest rate, and we have to take that money in draws within a certain period of time. We may not prepay the money back. We have to pay interest on the money. At first, I read it quarterly, but I believe we only pay it back once a year. I'm not quite sure how much that interest is each year. I know that from our $8 million from the street sales tax, we already have committed at least $5 million. And so if interest on this is $1 million, then we're committing $6 million for a council in the future to deal with declining retail sales. What we're doing with this, and I think fixing, getting new plows and fixing the bridges are very admirable, and we have to do it. But what we're doing here is getting a check for $18 million. We're putting it in the bank, and then we're saying, okay, kids, what do you want to spend the money on? And that is not a fiscally responsible thing to do, and I don't think the charter allows it. I've looked at chapter, or Article 10 and Article 11 of our charter. Our charter does not talk about an equipment lease purchase. It talks about going to the citizens of this community for a bond issuance and getting money from a bond with the citizens' approval and having a detailed budget on what we're going to spend the money on. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, and I think we all have very good intentions, but this is not the way to get there. And it's for those reasons I cannot support this as much as I want 11 new snowplows. We can't make something into something that it's not. It's still a pig, even with lipstick. It doesn't comply with our charter. I cannot support it. I'm sorry.
Mr. City Manager, would you clarify, please?
Repayments are twice a year.
Twice a year.
April and October, I believe. The street sales tax, of course, has very specified ballot language about what we can spend our money on, though, you know, which bridge gets reconstructed every year, which sidewalk is, you know, a matter of staff recommendation and council approval year to year. As I said, it's money that we're going to spend over the next 15 years anyway. We're just trying to get caught up, and I don't know about the lipstick and the road to hell, so.
I don't know what chapter, Article 10 and 11 are, Madam City Councilor, in the charter. Yes.
Brian
Yes.
Kidney, the Director of Finance and Administration. And I appreciate Gina, or Shannon, definitely be able to pull up this information. However, we do have Gina Rekoff, who did advise us with Gilmore Bell.
Okay.
And these are transactions that Gilmore Bell does, and specifically Gina does quite frequently. And we did look very closely at the charter before we did this financing, and I will let Gina
Yeah,
address
if
that
you could just have
question.
a little explanation of why we're choosing this financing method, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Good evening, Gina Rekoff with Gilmore and Bell. So there are a variety of methods that cities in Missouri, in particular, particularly charter cities in Missouri, can use to finance finance assets like this. One financing mechanism that many cities use is a lease purchase agreement, an equipment lease purchase agreement like this. The lease purchase agreement is actually, although it is a financing vehicle, it really is two things from a legal perspective. It is a lease And it is a purchase contract, because when you're done with the leasing transaction, then you have paid all of the costs of the thing that you have been leasing, and you have purchased that piece of equipment or that asset. And so for these types of transactions, we're really looking at the authority under state law to enter into leases and to contract for the improvements. Specifically because the lease purchase agreement and the payments under the lease purchase agreement are subject to annual appropriation, that lease purchase transaction is not considered a debt for federal or for state law purposes. And so the authority to enter into that kind of transaction is not typically found in the sections related, which gives the city all powers that are not limited or denied by statute or by charter. And the specific charter sections, the section 1.4, which is the general grant of power to the city to exercise all power that the General Assembly can confer on any city consistent with the charter and the statute. And then there's also in the charter Article 8 that talks about the budget and annual appropriations. And in particularly, there's section 8.11 of the charter that talks about the city not being prohibited from making contracts to lease, and particularly where those contracts are subject to annual appropriation. So this particular lease agreement has a provision in it that that gives the city the ability to not appropriate the payment in any particular year. If the city chose not to appropriate a payment in any particular year, then the bank or the lessor has the right to come and repossess the equipment that is financed with the lease. And that ability to non-appropriate then under the Missouri Constitution and case law, it says that it is not debt. So I hope that helps clarify those provisions.
I just have to ask a question. What are we leasing? What of the $17.94 million, what item are we leasing?
So it is whatever asset that is paid for with the proceeds of the lease. So the specific trucks, those are an easy example, right? So the trucks will be paid for with the proceeds of the lease.
So
and
we're buying the trucks.
the trucks will be paid for with the proceeds of the lease.
Right.
Okay, so the bank actually will have the title to those trucks, and the city will then be leasing the trucks from the bank through the equipment lease purchase
And so
transaction.
if we default, if I decide I want to sit on a beach in Jamaica and not pay $17.94 million back, what does Regions Bank do? What asset do they come and take from us? Do they take the bridges, the curbs, the sidewalks? What do they take?
In reality, they're taking the trucks. That's
it?
really the only, and they're very well aware that that is essentially the collateral that they're getting for this transaction. Banks in the municipal finance industry for these types of equipment leases, particularly where there are public works with sidewalks and bridges, you're right, you can't come and repossess the bridges or the sidewalks. And the banks are very well aware that that's it. At the end of the day, they are very much relying on what we typically refer to in the industry as the moral obligation of the city to continue making annual appropriations. But, as you all know, and as the bank understands, the city has the ability in any future fiscal year to decide that they do not want to appropriate, and the bank is really left without a whole lot of collateral.
Where in the charter does it allow a lease purchase? That's my question.
The Article 8, where it talks about the leasing, first of all, I think in section 1.4, where it says that in the charter, section 1.4, where it says that the city has all powers that the General Assembly could grant.
Right.
I think maybe the best way to help describe that as if we were talking about a third or fourth class city in Missouri. There is a specific provision in the Missouri statutes for third and fourth class cities in the general powers that says that there is the general power to lease and to purchase assets like this. And so the general powers that are conveyed to the city in the charter, and particularly in Charter Section 1.4, would be where we would look for the authority to enter into the lease and to purchase the types of public works, do the types of public works projects that you do here. And then in Charter 8, in Article 8, it is talking about budgets and appropriation. The city is permitted to build budgets, make annual appropriations, annual payments. And in Section 8.11 of the charter, it does specifically talk about making contracts of leases for periods exceeding the fiscal year where it's not prohibited by law. But obviously in the budgeting process, you can choose to make lease payments. I don't know for sure whether the city has enters into leases in other contexts where they lease office space or other types of equipment. But it is really that because it is an annually renewable at the city's option.
So we don't really need to go to the citizens to get bonds. We can just continue doing lease purchase agreements for anything, is what I'm hearing.
Yes, that's
Okay,
correct.
thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Couple questions.
Yeah.
One question has to do with the street sales tax. What has been the trend? My understanding was that it had remained fairly stable over the past 3 to 5 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's obviously it's a sales tax
It's
fund.
not going up.
It's
but
not going up, but it has held flat, yes.
It's about
Right,
where it
right.
was
And-
5 years ago.
And the same can be said of all of our sales tax funds.
Yeah.
They have to be closely monitored. We need to be thoughtful about them, but they are healthy.
And our waterfall effect with the pass-through for the use tax will take effect in January, February?
Beginning okay, couple of things. The street sales tax fund becomes perpetual January 1st, 2020.
Okay.
The waterfall with the use tax, the way that works is once both of the requirements have been satisfied, funds accordingly to their
Okay.
pro rata share. So in this case, a half cent.
Okay, very good. And then I just had a question about the amount, since it will be basically a lease, and that will be something we can't prepay, is that what I'm understanding? And so we will have to take the full amount out in a certain period of time. Obviously, we have to have bids or requests for proposals for the different projects that we will decide as priorities. But instead of taking that money out as we need it, we're going to take the entire amount out at the beginning. And so then the repayment begins when?
Beginning October 1 of 2020, we will begin making payments. At first, we're going to be paying interest only. Beginning in April of 23, then we'll start paying principal as well. The final payments will be due April 1, 2035.
Okay. And so,
And Councilman, if you don't mind,
Yeah,
Finance
go
Director
ahead.
has one more point he wants to clarify.
go ahead.
I do want to say that there's a refunding, if you will, ability at year 9. So even though it's a 15-year lease, at year nine, we would have the option to refund or fund other financings for that. So we're not locked into the full 15. It's up through the first 9 years. So I did want
Just for the
to
first 9 years.
clarify that. So, sorry.
And so
Oh, I'm sorry.
my last comment has to do with, with the concern for things like what happened on 42nd Street this year, where we had almost 9 months where the road was closed and it greatly affected traffic. I got tons of phone calls. It's in my district. And it was a surprise. It was one of those things that we knew that it was the old type of drainage system under the road, that it collapsed and the road collapsed. So I want to hear that those things will be priorities. Those things will be the things that we address, as well as some of the bridges, which obviously will cost us a lot more money down the road if we put them off. And that's the big advantage of doing this, is that we're going to save some money in the long run by doing some effective and preemptive maintenance before some of these bridges get to the point where they're going to collapse or have structural problems. And like this road collapse, we don't want any other roads or bridges to collapse. So that's what I'm looking to hear for part of the reason that we need to proceed.
Yeah, you're really benefiting from time and place where we're becoming a very data-driven organization, okay? And we're making these decisions not based on, you know, where it's at or things like that. We're making it based on what is the need, you know. So we're doing condition assessments, bridge ratings, things of that nature, so that when these projects come forward, you're addressing the worst of the worst. This is really making sure that those critical assets that are beyond their useful life or have failed or are going to be, you know, failing very soon, we're coming forward with those to tackle those before the problem mitigates and manifests itself further.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
several years ago, the fire department came in, gave us a presentation on their equipment. They showed us pictures of each of the trucks, the years of the make and the model of the truck, how old the truck was, and the condition of the truck. Some trucks they couldn't even get parts for. They gave us a cash price of how much it would cost to update the fleet because, again, it had been neglected for many years. Nobody wanted to put the money out. So they came back and we got with the financial people and we were able to lease fire trucks. That's how we got the updated fleet we have today.
Yes. Okay, any other comments or questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
I'd like to read in our charter, section 11.2. Public improvements, how costs are to be paid. The city shall have the power to pay, in whole or in part, for the public works or improvement authorized by this article or by any other provision of this charter, 1, out of the general fund, 2, out of other revolving improvement funds created, 3, out of any other fund available in whole or in part paid for by bonds, 4, in whole or in part by special assessments on benefited real property, or 5, special tax bills or other securities. Those are the charter specified 5 ways Public Works can pay for improvements. That's it. If we want to change the charter, then let's have that conversation. But that's it, it's Article 11, and that's what I am pointing out to this council, to look at our charter and follow our charter.
Madam Mayor, if I may.
Yes.
Mr. City Manager or Mr. Kidney, perhaps you can answer this. The funds that we are using are the sales tax funds, correct?
It's the street improvement sales tax.
Correct. So we would be following the charter and the use thereof.
I think that's what Ms. Rukoff was speaking to earlier.
Sure, so that makes sense to me. So we would be specifically with portion 5 there, Councilwoman. And if I also may, when we hired our executive team, we've asked them to take a different look because municipal financing is changing rapidly and it's moving and it's evolving in different forms. Our sales tax that we are collecting for our street tax is stable. It's not growing leaps and bounds as most of our sales tax is not, but it's stable enough to where we feel very confident in our executive team that we can put forth a package like this, which gives us the ability to have a larger sum upfront cash to do the work that we need to do. We talk about 42nd Street. I don't know if the councilwoman knows or not, but there's a bridge that's been out in Kentucky for, it'll be coming up maybe close to a year this summer. It's a unique situation because half of it's in Independence, half of it's in Kansas City. We have no funds to open up that bridge that allows my constituents to get from the Fairmont area to 24 Highway to 435 in an efficient manner because we have no funds. So by keep delaying this deferred cost, this is just going to keep delaying the process and the projects that we need to have to make our citizen or make our city run and move smoothly.
Okay, any other comments or questions?
A general obligation bond is the way to go under our charter. And that's all I'm going to say.
Mr. City Manager? Excuse me. Have you and the City Council reviewed this? I mean, do you review these ordinances before they come to the council?
Absolutely.
Is this in violation of the charter?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Mr. Councilman.
If I may. Okay, you're with?
I'm with Gilmore and Bell Law Firm. We specialize in public finance.
How long have you been doing this?
Our firm has been in business for a little over 40 years.
And have you done this in other cities?
Yes, we have.
And has this applied to other cities' charters?
Yes, it has.
I assume in different cities' charters that it would be different.
Yes, that's correct.
And who pays you?
We represent the city. The city is our client, and the city.
So they paid you to show us that we were within the charter regulations.
Yes, you're my client, and I'm giving you legal advice in this
So they
context.
took the initiative to say that we're not coming forward with something that violates our charter.
I would not feel comfortable under my duties of ethics to recommend something
Just
to you
say
that I
something
believed
like-
was
along those lines.
untrue.
All right. When this came forward, I applauded it. I thought it was an initiative to get these things rolling now. And to do it in a very the interest at this time, even if it goes the other way, we benefit from this so much. I can't see the bridge that all the people of Independence use, I would assume, or have access to, if it's completed. And this gets it completed ahead of our maintenance schedule with money that we would have used anyway for that within the 15-year structure. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
One more, just quick one, Madam Mayor, we can put this to rest, I believe. Just so everyone knows, this did not come out of a vacuum. This was brought before on the roll committee, I want to say in September, give or take. We gave the nod to move forward, to bring it forward to the November 12th council meeting. So there's been plenty of discussions and on how we were looking at this in different ways that we were going to do some funding. So this is not out of a vacuum.
Okay, very good. Madam City Clerk, I'm sorry,
no,
is
if
there
I
anything
may.
else? Okay.
Sorry.
Would you please call the roll? I'm sorry, did you have something?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Just not to be outlasted again. Yes, I heard those when you brought them forward, and we all agreed at the time. And we got on board with this. This is not just discussing tonight. We brought this forward on your recommendations, and we thought it worthy.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Perkins,
Yes.
Doherty,
Yes.
DeLucy,
No.
Robertson,
Yes.
Van Camp,
Yes.
Mayor Weir.
Yes, ordinance passes. I believe Councilman Van Camp, you had we'll move on to council member comments, I think. Did you have something for this evening?
Yes.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, thank you. As we look forward to 2020, I want to share an important initiative I'm going to be working on. As I visit with my constituents and other people in the city and go to various meetings, I am increasingly concerned about the rise in our homeless population. In the last year alone, we have seen the number of known homeless camps multiply 4 times over. This is a complicated issue, and it is one that will require a variety of resources to address. In some cases, it's a social service issue. In others, it's a law enforcement issue, it's a housing issue, it's a workforce development issue. It is a community issue. I started today by meeting with city staff and members of the Faith Committee, and I will accelerate these efforts in the weeks and months ahead. I hope you will join me in addressing a critical matter.
Thank you. Are there any other council member comments this evening?
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, for sure. Mr. City Manager, anything else?
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Okay, we are adjourned.